welcome back to another week of Beyond the Trailer Park. So it's just the two of us this week. Ashley's got mom duties again, unfortunately, and sometimes as much as you try and plan for that, hey, kids got to come first. So we miss her, but hopefully we'll have her back next week. So it's just me and Beth over there in Pennsylvania.
Howdy, howdy. Yes, it's called Lifus Interruptus, and it sucks.
Yes, it does. And so you got snow down there or what? Because
we have absolutely nothing. My hometown of Buffalo, I guess, is getting nailed, mostly with ice. And from the pictures you posted the other day, you're getting it too, or had it. So I don't know.
It's continued almost continuously since then.
Yeah, well, I quickly went over to my vanilla page and checked out what was going on, and I guess they're forecasting for Buffalo till today is Monday.
Yeah, that would be today.
2 p.m. today. I am so confused as to the storm. I think once again we were on the cusp of rain and cold and possibly snow and all that other stuff, but it's I look at it as typical Mother Nature. I don't plan on winter or spring until my birthday, which is in June. And yeah. I remember the year, it was either the year of the blizzard in 77 or the year after that we had snow on my birthday.
Well, it
didn't stick, but
yeah, that's June. That's pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember getting snow May 24 weekend, which, if anybody, all you non-Canadians, that's what, Memorial Day for you? I think? Yeah, it's Queen Victoria's birthday weekend here. So,
I mean, I know the year of the blizzard. I mean, I was taking final exams on my birthday. Now my birthday is the end of June. Okay, right. And usually we are out of school the week before, usually around the 18th, 19th. I was actually taking my algebra exam. I was in 8th grade, 7th or 8th grade. I think it was 8th grade. Right. And I was so mad because I got one wrong.
Oh no.
I was a math nerd in high school, junior high and high school, so my notes were like one page for the whole year because math just came easy, and I was pissed because I wrote down squared instead of cubed, and I realized it after I left the exam, and I finished it in like 10 minutes, so I sat there because we had to be there minimum 90 minutes, so I had to sit there. Yeah. And of course I didn't look at it, and then I was like 98. I was so pissed.
Brutal.
Yes, I was a perfectionist even back then. But yeah.
Damn.
So weird weather has crept up before, but
was it earlier in the week we had like torrential rain and thunderstorms, and I was sitting out on the front porch in the middle of the night in my bathrobe filming the thunderstorm, and
yeah, I remember you
and now we got 1.5 feet of snow, and it's still, last I checked, it was still snowing.
Yeah, I mean, we got a dusting, but it was gone today. I went out today to the store, and it was, like, gone. I mean, it's chilly, but I went out in my T-shirt with just a flannel shirt on, which, for running next door, which is the sheets,
right,
is no big deal, but I wouldn't want to walk in it in that kind of weather. Not that I walk very well anyway.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, I've ever since I took those pictures on Saturday afternoon, I've stayed in the house. So I'm like, no, I'm in denial. There's no snow outside. It's spring.
Yeah. Well, I find it funny because I'm basically a hermit. I do not leave my apartment. I have what they call is functional agoraphobia. I can go to work. I can go to the store, preferably when there's not a lot of people there. But I do not like to be around people. I have a really, really hard time with it. So for me, going out and what the weather's doing is like a total non-issue because I don't leave my apartment anyways. So I kind of joke about it, but yeah, I mean, I do worry about my dad because he does live in Buffalo, and although he
right.
lives at a senior center complex apartment building type thingy, he's still, I mean, responsible for his 3 feet of sidewalk. So
Yeah.
I don't like to hear that they've got like 10 inches of snow or something, and that's one of the reasons he sold the house 5 years ago, was because he could no longer really. I mean, he's in his 80s, mid 80s. Yeah, he could no longer take care of the house, and it was costing too much to have people come and plow and
Yeah.
all that stuff. And so, although I should probably call him, just make sure he's still breathing. Although he's probably down in DC with my brother, so.
Oh, well, if he's smart, yeah.
Well, usually around Easter time he goes down there for a week, so my brother deals with him. Not that my dad's hard to deal with in that regard, but
right. So yeah, I survived a zombie Jesus weekend last weekend.
I'm glad I don't have to deal with that.
Oh man, 2 days of that shit. Although I realized a new thing, because on Sunday with my family, and my cousins are rather on the fertile side, so there's like, there's so many people that they rent the Legion Hall for Easter.
Yeah.
And this year there were like 10 people that didn't show up, and it was still 3/4 full.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Now see,
so,
back in the day it was like that for us, but we never rented any type of hall.
Well, nobody has a house big enough for that many people anymore. But
yeah.
I realized I have a new strategy when they go to say grace now, because I actually legitimately had to use the washroom right before, and they started saying grace, and I was like, hey, I can stay in here and I don't have to watch that shit close up.
Yeah.
So my new strategy now will be, time for grace. Oh, look at that. I gotta pee. Although that's not gonna work with Arno's family, because they'd wait for me to come back, sadly. But
yeah, usually I do go up to a friend's house for Easter, but I didn't this year. I've been kind of antisocial since last July, and partly because my body just is not physically doing what I want it to do.
right,
holding a fork is really difficult. And
understandable.
I'm just kind of self-conscious because I'm a slob.
Yeah,
I'm even more so since last July.
Well, you have a good excuse, though.
Yeah, but I find it's sometimes really uncomfortable, because I mean they know how I believe, and they will occasionally make snide comments and stuff like that, but they're private individuals. They're not public about it, like what we see on social media like Twitter and Facebook. So yeah, I just kind of let it slide. But it's still really uncomfortable when they when anybody, not just them, let's pray. It's like
let's not, or the way I always used to say, let's not and say we did.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, it's like, part of me wants to be the angry atheist and just blast it out, and part of me is like, no.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'll be accommodationalist.
Well, it was funny too. On Saturday, we were at Arno's brother's for Easter, and they his family are kind of foodies, and anybody who knows me is like, I'm the complete opposite of a foodie, but that's a show of itself. But his brother for Easter gave everybody, if anybody's heard the stories, especially in Canada, you probably have, how what is it? Heinz moved their operations to like Mexico or overseas or some shit and laid off a bunch of people. Whereas French's, who makes French's mustard, they started making ketchup and manufacturing it here in Canada, I think in Ontario, not far from where his brother lives. So he gave everybody a bottle of French's ketchup, but it was all like different flavored ones. So like we got, and you'll laugh, but we got buffalo wings flavor. And you're like, it's not
buffalo wings. I was just having this discussion the other day.
Yep. But the funny part was every bottle had I guess I'm not sure where they got them, but they had these little cloth gift bags that had Easter bunny little heads and legs stuck on them, and they had like chocolate eggs. And so the drawstring of this gift bag, they looped it over the ketchup bottle, so it was like hanging off the ketchup bottle. But the funny part is, and I know those of you who are listening won't be able to see this, but here's my bunny, and the way the weight of the plushy head on this little gift bag, it makes the head like fall forward, so it really looks like Easter Bunny's been lynched.
I was just thinking that when you held it up.
And so it was like this row of like lynched Easter bunnies hanging off of bottles of ketchup, and that is just really kind of warped looking. And no one seemed to notice but me. I don't know why that is. Maybe
what I always find funny, kind of an addendum to that, is that
yeah.
if you really think about it, for those that celebrate Easter, had Christ been, quote, executed during the guillotine era or during the electric chair era, they'd be wearing crosses or
chairs, electric chairs.
Yeah, the equivalent of electric chairs. Or guillotines around their neck.
Or this day and age, they'd be wearing little gurneys.
Yeah, and there's a new meme out with the gurneys, although it's in shape of a cross. It's just, I find it rather bizarre, and the fact that they use the rabbit and they use the egg, which are not Christian symbolisms as much as they try to make them. It's just, I just find Easter now, especially now, rather just really bizarre. Even more so than Christmas. I can see Christmas other than the fact it's the wrong fucking month.
But it makes more sense.
Yeah,
and it's like let's celebrate the death and torture of like the best person supposedly to ever live.
Well, and one of the memes, and I don't know the accuracy of this, so it's not vetted, but the fact that Easter changes year to year based on the full moon of Nissan.
That's the other one is. Well, okay, so you can't figure out, supposedly when the guy was born, but you have no idea when the guy died and he was publicly executed. That seems a bit odd. Yeah.
I mean, we can go into the whole Ishtar thing and the whole Astera and stuff like that, and it's so bizarre that it's like, you can't even get the story straight. And I was trying to think. I think there was an article that pointed out that the whole. I mean, there is. I mean, as far as the historicity of it, there is no documentation of something of that magnitude happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And then was it a discussion you and I got into a couple weeks ago just about the historicity in general, and someone kept bringing up, like Josephus and all the supposed texts. It's like, no, none of those texts actually even.
Everybody needs to be reading Dr. Price and Dr. Carrier and David Fitzgerald and Acharya, and I'm sure there's going to be more soon. And they need to read them.
I'll throw in Mythicists in Milwaukee as well. they're very good as well. They're carrying on a lot of Acharya's work since her passing in on Christmas. But
Yeah.
yeah, I just and the arguments they use to rebut, what we it's asinine. It's just
Oh,
like
it
it's
is
crazy.
ridiculous. But they gotta twist it to fit what they want to be, I guess.
Yeah. It
I, I love how I can make people's heads spin the minute I say, "Well, Jesus never existed." What?
Well, what makes that argument so difficult, not that I'm disputing it, because I mean, I'm still kind of 50-50, although I lean more towards that he never existed, not so much the full astrotheology mythicist position of, let's say, of
Mhm.
Acharya, but it's like you said, it makes their head spin. But even if he did, and we were just talking about this before, even if he did exist, why would
Mhm.
he be worthy of worship?
Yeah.
I mean, because if you believe in the Trinity, which is a man-made document, it is nowhere in the Bible. There are verses that they use to support it to say, well, this is
Yep.
what God. Well, no, this is your interpretation of what the Bible meant. But
Yep.
if you believe in the Trinity, then Christ was God. Well, you can go even further. Old Testament God or New Testament God? Are they the same or are they different? Depends on your POV. I mean, that, depending on your sect, changes. I mean, and if, for me, because I was raised as a person that believes in the Trinity,
Yep.
um, for me, it would be, well, it's the same God, so I sure as hell fucking wouldn't want to worship the God of the Old Testament, because
Hell
that's
no.
why,
And
that's why women and children are chattel.
that's
Chattel.
why chattel. Yeah. That's why when I get the old, well, that was the Old Testament and that was meant for the Jews and New Covenant and blah blah blah. And I'm like, was it the same God? Well, yeah. Then he's still a dick and fuck him. I don't care. I don't care what covenant it is.
Yeah.
He did it once. He did it once, and covenant or not, he can fucking decide to do it again, according
Yeah.
to your bullshit. So yeah, fuck
Well,
that
what
guy.
makes that argument so annoying, and as you guys can tell, we're kind of avoiding the grief thing.
I'm not, but
Yeah.
go with the flow, man.
Yeah. This is a go with the flow show. Um,
Yeah.
Although yeah, Flo isn't visiting. So.
No, I'm past that shit.
Yeah, ditto. But I mean, the whole argument of the Old Testament, New Testament, that in itself is a whole argument. That depending on what
Yeah.
you believe, which sect you are part of, all depends on which you believe. I mean, using the LGBTI arguments, they try to make, the Leviticus passages part of the moral law when in essence it is not. It is strictly Judaic law. It is strictly written for Jews. It is strictly written for Levi priests. I mean, and it's a mind fuck. And
Yeah.
it's like my whole thing. I was always taught that Christianity, in and of itself. And I would assume that the the same would apply to Judaism and Islam.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the three Abrahamics, that a child should be able to understand what is written in the Bible. Well, not according to these fucktards.
Yeah. Man.
It's crazy.
So I suppose we should get on topic.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, I mean, well, we did start late, but
Yeah.
So I'm thinking because you've got more experience dealing with negative shit as a theist than I do because I actually didn't deal with anything as a theist. So what maybe you can talk a little bit about the difference.
You just summed it up in one word. Oh, look at Arno's shirt.
Yeah, it's his tiger shirt.
I like
I
that.
sum I summed it up how?
You summed it up. I didn't deal with anything as a theist.
So
And
you can expand on that a bit.
well, well, first I'll say as a caveat to this whole discussion is I am probably one of the worst persons to talk to about grief, about dealing with bad shit. My whole philosophy is you're born, you live, you die. Plain and simple. But
Yeah.
dealing with grief, dealing with why good things happen to bad people, and that type of shit, it's as individual as you and I.
Yes.
And how I deal with it is going to be different than how you deal with it. How you deal
Yeah.
with it is going to be different than how a friend of the show, Dave Foda, deals with it. We all approach it
Yeah.
from a unique perspective, and that's what people have to remember when dealing with grief. Loss of a spouse or loss of a loved one, or even just dealing with bad shit. I look at it as a challenge, and part of that is evoked by the fact that I was a theist for so long. And it was always, and it always came down to, you'll see them in the next life. Well,
Yeah.
there is no next life, regardless of what you may think. And I think the thing that really jerked my chain yesterday was I was looking, at articles dealing with grief and dealing with loss and stuff like that. And one of the things that they're now espousing, and I agree and I disagree with it. I agree in the fact that it's dealing with suicide, and suicide prevention and awareness needs to be forefront. Anybody that knows me knows that mental health issues are a big thing with me. But what I don't agree with is putting a fucking guardian angel on a pendant and touting it as, suicide awareness or prevention or
Oh,
no.
really?
Because yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, but to say, well, you'll see them in the next life is a fucking crock of shit. That's ignoring the
Yeah.
problem. And I've always, been the type to believe that there's two types of depression. There's, what we know is the clinical depression, like what I
Yeah.
suffer from, especially since my stroke.
And it's the type of depression that happens regardless of what's going on in your life.
Yes. Yeah, and then there's what I call situational depression, which I'm experiencing firsthand, since my nephew was murdered 2 years ago with people involved in that. They're not getting over the situation. Not that I'm saying that getting over the murder of a loved one is, easy to do and everybody does it. But what I'm seeing in situations such as that, at least with the people I have experience with, is that they're, for lack of a better word, reliving that day and they're not moving forward. And that's one of the things, like, I mean, I suffer from post-stroke depression, and Deb knows full well how bad it got. I mean, on top of the fact that I also have bipolar disorder. So I get the nice, fun times of having mixed states where I'm depressed and manic at the same time. But I know it's a phase. I know it's going to pass. And that's something I had to learn and be taught that, basically give it another day. You may feel by the next day. With grief in general, as far as like with the death of somebody, and divorce can be looked at the same way.
It's
The breakup of
absolutely the same. Yeah.
yeah. I mean the stages, so to speak, and I'm not referring to Ann Kubler-Ross, but the stages are the same. You're still going to have the exact same feelings you are if someone died as if you got divorced. At least I think so. I mean,
I know so. I know so.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in a way I do too, because I look at my last relationship and it's like I'm finally now to the point where I'm past the anger, I'm past all that other stuff, to where I just want to get on with my life.
Yeah.
Although I'm having a little difficulty in that area.
Yeah, but that's due to circumstance beyond your. Yeah, that's not your fault. Anybody else's.
That's not divine providence.
That's equipment issues.
Yeah. Problem is, it's a really big piece of equipment.
Just to so let me ask you this though. Now, I know your take on it is different than many people, but you've obviously been also surrounded by, you know, theists, and being that you were in theology school, and that you would have been surrounded by a lot of hardcore theists. So
Yeah.
what did you observe much in how they tried to use religion as a coping mechanism? Maybe because you didn't really do that yourself, but what did you have much experience with other people doing it?
Well, I think the coping mechanism idea is built in automatically, not just
Okay.
in grief, but in life in general. I mean,
Yeah.
if something good happens, oh, God found my keys. You know,
Yes.
or speaking on addiction, I mean, I've been there and done that.
Mhm.
You know, it's like using the AA as an example. Belief in a
Yes.
higher power to get past your addiction. No, that was your hard ass work to
Yes.
get to that point, to get to the point that you want to change. God didn't do that, or a God didn't do that, or a higher power, or guardian angel, or whatever didn't do that. You did, and I think within religion, and it doesn't necessarily mean Christianity, although that's what I'm most familiar with. Obviously,
Yes.
they take away the personal responsibility in everything, even in good things. Like, you know, this past weekend, I had kind of a turn for the better. I mean, you
Yes.
know that I was, you know, like, physically I'm still the same. I'm not, you know, that's going to be a lot of hard work. But mentally, my whole attitude changed because the fog, so to speak, has kind of lifted. I did have a second stroke 3 weeks ago. I mean, it wasn't even a year. So getting to
Yeah.
that point and realizing that my efforts are what is making me, you know, hit these
Yeah.
milestones. It's my effort, not some God, because why did he give this to me in the first place?
Yeah. Well, and the thing that pisses me off is when you touched on it briefly, people have this tendency to, like, anything good happens, oh, praise be to Jesus and thank you
Yes.
God, and God, you know, cured this and that or and whatnot. And the minute something goes wrong, well, that's your fault. You must have did something to piss off
Or
God,
Satan
or
did it.
yeah, or you were too weak, and Satan, or Satan's trying to get you, and blah blah blah. But a lot of the time they do kind of blame the person. It's like if you pray that, you know, your spouse doesn't die of cancer and they die anyway, well, you just didn't pray hard enough. You know,
Well,
it's
yeah, it's kind of funny because when I was first diagnosed with bipolar, and this was back in the mid 90s, it started
yeah.
around 92, where my depression became to the point where things that I used to love to do, which mostly are surrounded sports. I still was playing hockey, although I retired, I think, the year before, and I finally realized that I had to because I have TBI from previous concussions. And, you know, physically I couldn't do it, but I was still playing softball. And in fact, the Silver Bullets were big back then, and that's the women's hardball team.
Okay.
And I actually did have a tryout. It was an open tryout in Buffalo, and I ended up blowing my knee out 2 days
Uh,
before the tryout, so that kind of scratched that. And, you know, people, you know, a lot of people, oh, that's divine providence. No, but around that time, you know, I lost interest in all that, and so my depression started around that time. But it was another 2 to 3 years before I realized, or before the doctors realized and diagnosed me with bipolar. And I was still kind of agnostic, although I was leaning more towards atheism than agnosticism. And for the longest time, I kind of, I don't know, I won't say I blamed God, but I couldn't understand what I was doing wrong.
mhm.
And to take it back even further, in college, I had issues with self-injury. I'm a cutter. I have no qualms admitting that. I'm been free of it for quite a few years, and I do fight it every day. It's not something that goes away. I've found other means to take out my self-loathing. um, and that's what it comes down to for me.
Right.
But for years they tried to do, oh, you're not praying enough. Oh, you're praying to the wrong God. I've heard that before.
Fuck yeah.
That coming mostly from Catholics. You're not studying the Bible enough. Hell, I'm a theology major. I think I study the Bible.
I know.
Although I probably read the Bible more now than I did then. All manner of excuses. And they even went so far, and this is something I focus on with my blog, is they did an exorcism, or what we would call a deliverance now.
Yes.
They use the term exorcism and deliverance interchangeably, and they're two different rites, for lack of a better word. A deliverance is more Bob Larson style, and you all rail on him all the time, and he's been quiet lately, which is kind of scary.
I was gonna say that's not necessarily a good thing.
No, but and it was totally, in my opinion, botched. Now, normally I would say that the psychological impact of that could have been really damaging, and in a sense it was. Instead of booting me out of religion altogether, it drove me deeper in.
Yeah.
And I started blaming myself for all my faults. Because that's what you do as a Christian. If something's wrong, it's your fault. It's not, God doesn't exist. And it took my diagnosis of bipolar for me to finally realize it. And when I finally dumped religion altogether, which was about 95, 96, is when I finally admitted to myself that I was an atheist.
Yeah.
That I actually started to get better.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have the self-hatred. I didn't have the self-loathing or in the blame game. I mean, come on, you're blaming a child for something they did or didn't do.
Yeah.
And threatening them with eternal torture in hell, if you believe that, depending on which denomination you are. Because some denominations don't believe in hell. Judaism, their concept of hell is totally different than the Christian concept. They think of it more as Sheol, or the Greek alternative of the underworld. So it differs, and a lot of people don't realize that the concept of hell we have today is a Catholic version, so to speak, based on Dante's Inferno.
Right.
If you look at the Bible, it's there, but it's not. And the Old Testament is different than the New Testament. So when I got rid of all that garbage, so did a lot of my other issues go away.
Funny that.
Yeah, and that morphs over into how you deal with death, how you deal with divorce, how you deal with, in my case, my stroke. And I know with my bipolar, my breakthrough as far as my treatment went was that moment. And, it took my therapist, I think it was number 18. Yes, I went through a lot of therapists. And it was basically because, although she didn't, proselytize, she didn't believe in any of that shit.
Yeah.
And I think, does religion cause mental illness? I won't go that far, although on a personal, yes, but I think how it manifests, how religion manifests, whether you already have it, and I've mentioned it before with psychiatric patients, if they have no religious ideology pre-diagnosis or pre-manifestation of their illness, they show no religious iconography. If it's after, if they're already religiously indoctrinated, they will. And there is a study that shows that, I don't know how much it's been followed up on, but I strongly believe if you already believe, if you've been raised since early childhood to believe in God or believe in the bullshit of the Bible, if you become mentally ill, you're going to act out in that manner. I mean, we see it in, Shujin used the example the other night of Andrea Yates.
Yes.
Everybody blames her. Everybody blames, oh, she had a mental illness. Well, yes, she was diagnosed with postpartum depression. Her husband knew that.
Yep.
But yet, in his patriarchal mind, and she was part of the patriarchal church,
Yep.
did not support her. So, I mean, personally,
Yep.
I hold him and their church just as responsible for the deaths of the children.
Absolutely.
You know, it's
quick,
a sticky wicket.
Quick segue. Hi Stan, I see you over there in the Q&A section there. And it's a bit off topic, but we'll go there for a minute anyway. And he's asking, do we ever experience discrimination for being atheist? He said, I dislike the way atheists are portrayed as smug, fedora-wearing neckbeards. Well, Beth and I don't have beards, but, you know.
Well, speak for yourself.
Okay, well, any advice on dealing with judgmental religious types? I think it's best to avoid them. You can't reason with them. Well, thank you for your question, Stan. And I'm in Canada. You may or may not know that, but I'm in Canada. So I personally have not ever well, no, that's not true. Years ago, when I worked in the office of a factory, and this was in my goth days. So I became an atheist at the age of 17. So if you haven't watched before, Stan, you might not know that. But I became an atheist at the age of 17. So my entire adult life, I've been a very open atheist, and it's really not that big of an issue here in Canada. But the one time I did, and it wasn't so much for being an atheist, but as a gothy kind of person, and I'm always big on individual expression and being, I'm a huge nonconformist and doing my own thing. So when I worked in this office, I always like to personalize my space as much as I can. And so I had a number of little plushie, like I had a couple of little bats and a gargoyle that I bought at the Smithsonian, or not the Smithsonian, it was the Metropolitan Museum of Art. But little plushies, like little bats and things, sitting up on one of my shelves. And I got hauled into HR one day, and I was told that I couldn't, and I had these things in another office because I had changed, my position had changed, and where the position I used to have, I only shared an office with my immediate supervisor. It was just two of us, and I had all this stuff in the office before, and then I got moved into a room where there was like 8 other women in a giant office room, so we all had little cubicles and whatnot. And so, but I'd had this stuff for like a year and a half, and I just moved it from one office to another. But this other office was in a much more highly trafficked area, and they hauled me into HR, and they're like, well, you can't really have that stuff because we had a customer come through and they said that bats are against their religion. And I'm like, and at the time I was not into activism. My non-belief had just been, you know, the same as I like to wear, you know, boots kind of thing. It wasn't a distinguishing factor about myself because it just was never an issue before. And I didn't know what to do. And at the time, I knew that what they were doing wasn't really right. But now there were I knew there was other people that had like Christian shit. And there was another girl who was Hindu. And now I didn't know anything about Hinduism back then. I've since studied it to a degree now, and I know a number of the Hindu guys. I think it was a picture of Hanuman on her desktop, I think. Hanuman,
well, you also have Kali as a tattoo.
Well, I didn't then. This is over 10 years ago. This is at least 10 years ago. So the Christian people, if I'd have made a stink and said, okay, if I have to take my shit down, then there's no religious, I'm going to press that you not allow any other religious stuff. And I didn't, only because I liked the Hindu girl, and I didn't think that her religious stuff was that intrusive. Like it could have been Ganesha too. It was either Hanuman or Ganesha she had on her desktop. And I didn't want her to have to take that off. The Christians, I didn't give a shit about. I was like, I could have made them take all their crosses away. But that one sympathy, and I think I sympathized with her because she dared to, because religious diversity. They were the people that we were working with. There was a lot of Portuguese. There was a few Muslims, but they were Abrahamic, and so they got sort of the same. But that pissed me the fuck off. So I can't say I've never. That was that one time. So I think I was allowed to keep like one thing up, but I should have been like, I did kind of say that's not fair because other people can have theirs, and they just didn't really care. So yeah. Now, well, Beth, I know you've had discrimination.
Yeah, but my discrimination actually more falls towards the fact that I'm an out lesbian, and I have been since I was old.
Yeah.
But as far as the religious, from what I see, like where I live now, I'm out, but I'm not. In other words, if somebody asks me, I'm not going to deny that I'm an atheist. Or if somebody brings up a religious question, I'll give my point of view. But really, for my physical safety, because I live in where I call it Pennsylvania. Yes. And if you know the like Tennessee, Kentucky, Mississippi, those types of states, the mentality is if you don't believe in God, basically you're fucked. Yeah. So I don't go around advertising that I'm an atheist, but I don't deny it either. So I mean, my discrimination has more been because I've been an out lesbian than I have been an atheist. But I do see it not so much here personally, but I do I follow the atheist movement, and it goes to the whole idea of Christian exceptionalism, or what I call the faux Christian persecution. And a lot of people are especially in blogs, are starting to hit it hard. Freedom from Religion Foundation, if you follow them at all, has been battling it for years. And I do support their work and what they do. In fact, Hemet Mita from Friendly Atheist just posted where the Chino Valley Unified School District in California now has a $203,000 bill. That's that's 6 numbers. And they're like, basically, we don't have to pay that. It's the damn atheists. They're the problem. And I think, like, in your situation, I probably would have done the same thing, just for the simple reason, one, where I'm at, jobs are very hard to come by. We're one of the few areas in Pennsylvania that has not reverted to the 1996 Clinton law of having to work a minimum of 20 hours to maintain your SNAP benefits, which is food stamps. I just find it pervasive, and it falls into what we're talking about with grief, because I mean, last year I lost my mom. Granted, she was 94 years old, and one of the things that was kind of disgusting to me, although I didn't raise a stink about it in front of my father anyways, he was dealing with enough. Basically, he never left my mom's bedside except to go home and sleep while she was sick. But the minister basically came in, did the last rites time thing. I'm a Catholic. I was raised a Catholic wannabe. I was Missouri Standard Lutheran. And those that know the Lutheran Church know the joke behind that. Not quite sure what Luther was trying to prove. I haven't figured that out yet. But he came in and basically stated that, my mom's, we'll say, suffering, although she was in hospice care. I don't think she was suffering per se, physically anyways. That her suffering was in God's time.
Oh, fuck.
And I stood there in the hospice room while the first time, listening to him saying this, and basically I kind of looked at my father, who has never really talked about euthanasia in the sense that would it be something my mother chose. But to hear my father say, this was that, I think it was after the fact, a while after, you know, even hint towards that, it just
Yeah.
surprised me, because I know the mental anguish that my father, after almost 60 years of marriage, must have been going through.
Yeah.
I mean, I went through that same type of reaction when my girlfriend was killed in college.
Yeah.
And basically, it kind of snapped me back to that point. And basically, if this is the God that you worship, that would allow a 94-year-old woman literally gasp for breath, that it's his time when he takes her, fuck
Yeah.
you and fuck your God. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, the next day he came in, I left the room. I went out and had a cigarette. And I ran into the minister in the hallway, and he said, well, that was rude. And I'm thinking, rude? You want rude? And I said to him,
Ugh.
what you prayed yesterday about God's timing, with my father present as he sat there for months, well, not in hospice, but in general, to say that it was God's timing as she sits there gasping for breath, and you call my leaving the room so I didn't laugh in your fucking face rude?
Yeah.
So it's little shit like that. I mean,
Yep.
my relationship with my parents has been tenuous at best. Partly my fault. Probably mostly my fault, because I'm kind of the black sheep of the family. Being gay, being an atheist.
Heathen.
Yes, I'm a heathen, and I also have a mental illness, which in my church, yeah, that's 4 strikes against me, because I'm also female.
Yep.
I mean, I had gone dragged to church to, it was Mother's Day, if I remember correctly, and he actually did a sermon specifically targeted towards homosexuality.
Of course.
And being that, as far as I know, I am the only gay person that was a member of the church, gee, I wonder who that was targeted for. And
Yeah.
I've caused issues within the church. I think it was that sermon that I basically stood up and say, well, what about Martin Luther? You guys are so big on the dude. He's an anti-Semite, right? So, yeah, it's kind of, I mean, some of it I've caused, but most of it's shit like that drives me nuts. And it's this pervasive Christian exceptionalism that we have in this country, where, if you want persecution, go over to the Middle East. I know this is a drawn out trope, but seriously, I mean, as much as I do not agree with the missionaries that go over there, such as Saeed Abedini, he caused his own issues, in my opinion. But I do not believe they should be in jail. Or, well, Raif Badawi. We both follow his plight. He's in jail for a thought crime.
Yes. Exactly.
If you want persecution, go over there and face it. What you have in this country, whether it's dealing with a bad situation. In my case, I mean, I actually had somebody come up to me last Thanksgiving after my first stroke and say, "Oh, you have a lot to be thankful for." No, I don't. I can't even put my fucking pants on. What do I have to be thankful for? It's that mentality. And when those of us that are heathen face these things and don't have to do it with God, that's what makes it, I think, 10 times better.
Exactly.
I mean, there's parents out there who are raising their children secular. I'll use Dan RL as a good example. He actually has a book published. He writes for the blog The Anthropology, that's his blog, and he highlights how he's raising his children to be free thinkers, for lack of a better word. I'm not sure I like that word. But he's raising them secular. But he's letting them make their own decisions. There's people like Vicky Garrison, who we've had on as a guest, who are highlighting the atrocities of the patriarchy movement and Quiverful, and who has now chosen to raise her children secular. And they're growing for it. They are becoming their own people instead of being the drones that the church, and I mean the whole church, not just Catholicism, puts out. I mean, because that's what it is. They're just droning the dogma that has been driven into them since the time they were born. I mean, if you and I were born over in the Middle East, we would most likely be Islam. Same thing if we were born in Japan, we'd be Shinto. If we were born in China or Tibet, we'd probably be Buddhist. If we were born in India, we'd be Hindu. It doesn't matter where, you know, it's that theology, that dogma that's drilled into us, and how we handle, you know, stuff outside of that religion. I think that's what makes, you know, people that do it with, oh God, much stronger in the long run. Did I make any sense?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I just went off on a rant because that one really hit me.
Well, and what Stan was asking is like, how do you deal with that when you do? And so I've changed a lot since the time when I got told my bats were against somebody's religion, and and now I'm like, that's bullshit. I've studied a lot of religions since then. I've never come across one, especially one where the person would actually be physically in Ontario, you know, where seeing a bat is against your fucking religion. Like, I'm sorry, that's ridiculous. And so how I would deal with it, like, then I was kind of like, I was mad, but I didn't want to cause problems or, you know, cause issues for other people, etc. Now I would have put my foot down, especially I've actually had human resources training since then too. And I would have put my foot down and I would have said, okay, like, this is your company and, you know, you can make that policy. It doesn't infringe on anybody's actual rights per se, but you're going to do this across the board. Everybody's crosses come down, any Bible shit goes away. And as much as I liked the Hindu girl, I would have said no Hindu shit on your computer. And I would have insisted on it. And now, like, what I found, and I noticed you mentioned, you know, it's worse for atheists down in the South. And unfortunately, Ashley couldn't be here because she could definitely vouch for that. Yeah. I've spent time down there with Ashley and in Savannah. And last month, when I was in Nashville for the NanoCon, I kind of saw a little bit of that, but how I am, I think, kind of diffused any issues, at least where I was, because I was wearing, now the one night when I was in Savannah, I was wearing a t-shirt. It has a picture of the devil on it and it says, "God's busy, can I help you?" And honestly, I've never really collected any like overtly atheist t-shirts like that say I'm an atheist or have atheist symbols on it or anything. I haven't bothered because I haven't seen the point. But that particular one, so that was like the most atheist one I had, really. So I was wearing that, and and Ashley and Bobby were saying that they were enjoying the looks that I was causing from other people. But for me, I'm a pretty confident person, and I'm kind of loud, in case you hadn't noticed. So when we were in Nashville and there was about 8 of us having dinner or breakfast at a Hardee's, and the woman asked me like, "Oh, is there like an anime convention?" Because one of the girls with us had an anime themed purse on, I guess. And I just looked her square in the face. I was like, "No, atheists." And this was in Nashville, and she just kind of like, you know, that little sucked in breath kind of thing. And I just smiled and I looked her square in the face and I said, "But that's okay. I'm Canadian." And she just did not know what to do with it. And I find that, and without being an asshole, but being, you know, overt about, like, not walking around, "Hey, I'm an atheist, blah, blah, blah." But if it comes up being, "Yes, I'm an atheist, and here I am." Like,
well, I think it goes to what Dave Silverman was saying when we interviewed him about normalizing it.
Exactly, and I was going to get into that. Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Okay. Well, as Dave said, I am now what I realize, because he's kind of coined the term, I'm a firebrand atheist. And so when I go to somebody like, yes, we're at atheist conference, and but then if I was to get any grief over it now, personally, I love it when a Christian gets, pissy at me. They never do it in person because the majority of them are cowards. But when they do it online, I fucking love it. Like, I eat that up when they're like, you're evil, you're going to go to hell. And I'm like, all right, like, thanks for the compliment. Can I have another? And it pisses them the fuck off because they don't know what to do with it. Because I've learned that if I don't get angry because they want a response, then what I'll do is I'll smile and I'll be like, thanks for the compliment. Wow. Mm-hmm. And they don't know what the fuck to do with that. And it disarms them. And I find that, and I find this works in a lot of life's issues. It's kind of one of my mottos is know what your adversary wants and never give it to them. So if I know that they want to, because a lot of times when they needle like that, they want proof that you're the angry, disaffected and bitter person because you don't have Jesus. So if they poke you until you give that reaction, and it's not like you could be the happiest person out there, but if somebody is an asshole to you long enough, you're probably going to turn around and bite their head off, and that's what they want, because then, see, I told you you were bitter and angry. And so that's why I do my best to be sweet and happy and like, oh, thank you. Absolutely. I'm a slut and a bitch. Yep. Can I have another one? I love your compliments. And,
didn't you, when you were on a Yahoo group, didn't you do, every time someone, quote, insulted you, you put it as a signature file. Signature file. And I thought that was kind of interesting because, and it does tie into our so-called overall topic, is that how we handle it, and it's going to be different from everybody. Like, you live up in Canada, you don't face the religious batshittery like we do here in the U.S.
And I saw Stan's actually Canadian too, so hi.
Excellent.
Yes. But and he even said, like, I find Canadians aren't pushy about religion. So
and it really, I'm drawing from memory here. It was something I quickly glanced at earlier, but there is actually a study or a paper or something, I don't remember which, where they compared the attitudes, and really the U.S. as far as religious batshittery outshines pretty much every country on the face of the planet. I mean, the shit we have to put up with, whether we're dealing with divorce, child custody is another issue. I mean, I know of stories of parents who are divorced and have children, and the ex is bitching in court because the father or the mother is atheist. Well, so what? It just basically, and it goes back to what Dave Silverman, was saying about normalizing atheism. We're not bad people. The only difference between us and them, if you want to put it in, is we don't believe in God or gods. Well, we don't believe in that higher power.
And if I go back to what happened in my old job, because I let it slide, I gave them the impression that it was okay to do that to people. And so I can't do anything about it now. I wasn't equipped to deal with it in a better way because I was literally shocked that even came up. Like, it was, especially since I'd had this stuff in my office previously for over a year. So, I didn't deal with it as well as I could have because, like I said, now I gave them the impression that it was okay to do that. And so then, and I don't really think that it was a, quote, customer. I think it was some other person in the office who wanted to get pissy with me because they didn't like that I didn't conform to whatever, and they were causing problems, and that was just an excuse. They weren't the best HR department anyway, but that I think that's what it was. And so that person in that office now also got the message that, hey, I can foist my beliefs on other people and use HR to do it. Now, if that had happened to me again, and like I said, if I put my foot down and said, okay, fine, but you have to make it the same for everybody else, and you have to go through and make a policy that there's to be no overt displays of religion, and, you know, the Ganesha has to come off the computer and all of that, it would send a message to the other people that that's not acceptable. And if you want to equality, then you're going to get equality and you're going to lose privilege. So to tie that back to what David said, is that if I had taken the brunt and if I had stood my ground, then I would be making it better for the next atheist to come along. And that's what Firebrand is all about, is if you like, you don't have to be an asshole, but if you're like, for me, I'm overt, right? Like if it comes up, yep, I'm an atheist and this is why. And if by doing that, you make it easier for those who come after you.
Well,
so if you can do that, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to say, the whole thing of making it easier for the next person, and that's something Dave did drill into, is that as atheists, I mean, I think we learn every day what we should and should not do, what we can and cannot do. I won't say we push the laws, so to speak, but we push closely held religious beliefs. Gee, where have we heard that phrase before from?
Yeah.
But it goes back to religion in and of itself, and I'm speaking specifically towards Christianity. They rely on a 2,000-year-old book.
Yep.
And it does not change. It is not a living document.
Yep.
And if you look at some of the rationale for some of the Reich's legislation dealing with a variety of issues, you can take your pick, basically. It always goes back to, well, my interpretation of the Bible says this. And yes, it has not changed. It's a living document versus the Constitution, which is a living document, but they will never refer to the Constitution.
Yeah.
Why? Because if you look at the Constitution, there is no mention of God, there is no mention of Jesus, and there's no mention of Christianity in that document.
Yeah.
Whatsoever. That is why they rely on the Declaration of Independence,
which is not a legal document.
Yes, and they do it intentionally because it mentions Creator, and to them that is their God. And this goes to something that Stan brought up, that about certain states still actually have on their books, and Pennsylvania is one of them. And I am hemming and hawing at possibly challenging this, that atheists cannot hold public office. Yeah. And PA is one of those states where in their state regulations or legislation, you cannot hold public office, but it is overridden by the federal constitution.
Yeah, so it could be, it wasn't be enforceable.
Yeah, it's void, but
it's still there.
The discussion, it's still there, and discussion revolves around, would somebody have to challenge it to get it removed? And there's kind of discussion that no, because the federal Trump state. So it's a sticky issue, and it does become an issue in dealing with death specifically. It does become an issue, especially in divorce. Where do you reside when the courts in general side with the quote Christian?
Yeah.
And it's just like your situation that you had at work is, who is HR going to side with? You know, they could go the could go the Chino school route and say, Constitution be damned. We don't give a shit that it's in the Constitution, separation of church state. We're going to foist our religious opinion on you. And that's what it comes down to. And I think how we handle it, like how I would handle it, well, probably would be pretty similar to Ashley, considering where I live, but how I handle it compared to when I lived in New York may be different than how I would handle it if I was, say, down in Mississippi or Alabama. I mean, when you have Rory Moore as your Chief Justice of their state Supreme Court. I mean, even in Texas, I mean, we can use the abortion issue. I mean, they're basically trying to outlaw abortion altogether, and they're backdooring it. They're not going after Roe v. Wade. They're doing all sorts of other bullshit that is enough to make your head spin. I know it's making mine. It's not even an issue with it. I follow.
So I guess like what a lot of people deal with, and I've talked to a number of people that were either still sort of considering themselves agnostics or had just kind of tentatively taken the leap into, I think I'm an atheist. But it's the whole grief and loss thing that really tends to hold people back. And I've talked to a number of people that, I lost somebody in my life, and that whole idea that if I accept that I'm an atheist, I'll never get to see them again. And that was a hard thing for them. And I think the first thing that we have to kind of understand is, whether or not you say I'm an atheist, or you hang on to, well, maybe I'm agnostic or whatnot, that doesn't mean that you're going to see them again. The reality is there, whether we want to accept it or not. And that's a hard thing for a lot of us to kind of admit. And I think that, we have to kind of figure out, okay, so if I don't have this sort of last ditch hope that, yes, I'm going to see, this person again, or people in some cases, like myself, I've lost a number of people over the years. And so what do I do if I can't cling to that hope? And I think that's where it leaves a lot of people sort of hanging, is how do I proceed if I don't have that to hang on to? And that's a really tough one. And even for myself, like I said, I was an atheist at the age of 17, and I didn't suffer a loss in my life until I was 19. So it was a couple of years later, the first time when I lost my first grandparent. And even though I never believed in heaven or anything, and we talked about this last year when we did our ghost hunting episode, I kind of clung to that notion that, I don't believe in souls, but maybe there's a way that our brains chemical mental energy can live on. So I clung to that bullshit. And now I'm like, yeah, that's total bullshit, because there's no science to even suggest that could be a thing. But I didn't know, and I never studied science really. So I just was like, oh yeah, that's possible. Sure. So, I don't believe in God and I don't believe in heaven, but maybe there's like ghosts or in a different way. And I thought I was being really clever. I'm like, yeah, I'm an atheist that believe in ghosts kind of thing. And it's kind of
gee, that sounds familiar.
But I hung on to that for many, many years. And largely because a couple of years after that, I lost my father. And that was the biggest loss to me. And so I kind of clung to that with this hope that maybe, and that's why I got into ghost hunting too. It was like, well, if I can find a way that we find evidence for other people's ghosts, then maybe, I can find my dad again. And it took a long time to let go of that, even as I like to say, an ardent atheist. Like, I've always been a firebrand. I just didn't know what it was called, You know, I would argue you till you're blue in the face that there's no heaven and there's no God, but then I'd be like, oh, but I'm gonna go ghost hunting this weekend, and maybe, you know, dad'll show up or something. Like, you know, it's fucking stupid, but that's how desperately I needed to hang on to that idea, even as an in-your-face atheist. So it is so hard to get past that, and that's what so many people get stuck on. And I think it's something that we ought to really talk about more, because we don't really. And I get that question too, is like, well, what does atheism offer? Because Christianity or you know, Islam or whatever, it always offers this, well, you know, you're gonna live forever and you're gonna go get to see grandma and, you know, all these people and your pet dog Skippy again and all of that. And then they say, well, if I can't have all of that, what does atheism offer? And that's a hard question for people to answer too. And my way of looking at it as, well, atheism offers you reality. Atheism offers you your own strength of will and character. And because and this is what pisses me off too with faith-based quote therapy. And people go for that, for not just for grief, but for, like you said, divorces or and I just lost Beth, so I'll just keep talking. Like divorces or you know, job loss or whatever you might go see a counselor for. And what pisses me off about that is, you go to a religious-based counselor, they tend to spend all their time talking about how your faith is an issue and what you need to do to get, you know, spiritually better, and not, there you are.
Yeah, my internet crapped out all of a sudden.
Well, I was just saying that when you go to a religious-based therapist for whatever reason, they tend to spend all their time talking about what you need to do in terms of your faith, right? Like, well, you need to improve your spirituality or your relationship with Jesus. And they don't spend any time actually working on your own actual issue, right? That's I think what pisses me off about that. So if you're struggling with grief, or you're struggling with depression or whatever else that you may go to a therapist for, if they're sitting there talking about, well, you have to pray more and go to church more and blah, 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 that's not working out your issues. And for me, I've dealt with everything crappy in my life by myself. And that was just sort of out of necessity. But one thing that really taught me is how to know myself, how to spend that time reflecting internally, talking to yourself. I know it sounds weird, but talk to yourself, learn about yourself. What do you think or feel or experience in regard to whatever issue you're having? That's the kind of work that you need to do when life throws shit at you, not sitting there going, well, maybe if I, you know, lay flat on the floor and don't eat for 2 days and cross my toes and, you know, kiss the floor while I pray, then maybe God will listen to me. Like, no, that's just bullshit. You need to know yourself. Know what, you know, think about, why do I feel the way I feel? What causes me to react the way I react? And how do I work on that to make it better? What do I need to do to feel better? Those sorts of things, instead of sitting there obsessing about, you know, how do I prostrate myself the right way, you know, so that God decides I exist, which is bullshit because he doesn't exist. But, you know, that to me is what people ought to be spending their time in. And a therapist is there to help you with that. They're there because they've done the work, they've done the education, they understand the ins and outs of, you know, human behavior and human psyche, that they can guide you on that. But you're the only one that can really do that, to me.
Well, I think you hit on it too, is like you said, you were 19 when you had your first loss. And in my case, my first loss was, I was 5 years old.
Right.
And that was a grandmotherly type that I called aunt. She was not blood, but she was a friend of the family and had been so since after the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned that for a specific reason. She became friends with my mother. Well, my grandmother. My grandmother was my second that I remember, and I was about 10. So for me, I faced death very young. Granted, I was indoctrinated into the theistic mindset, but even then I began to realize that, one, death is permanent. And I really did, I think, in some ways doubt the whole idea of the afterlife, but it didn't come to fruition until when I was in my 30s. Yeah. But, you know, I have, you know, for me, I have faced death since a very young age. I know people that are in their 40s and 50s who are just now facing it. And in some regards, it really sucks for them. But it's a good thing, you know, that, I know I'm in my 50s, so there's an age difference there. But I think it's, you know, we take on the indoctrination that our parents did, and, like, you know, all the way back down to our grandparents, great grandparents. And I think in especially American society, how we handle grief, specifically dealing with death, that's how we learn. And I think I upheld the view, you born, you live, you die, even before I became an atheist. I think the death of my girlfriend in college was really the fruition of it. The impetus was when I lost my best friend at 16 to bone cancer. And it really, it hit me hard. And it wasn't so much that she died. It was, there was a hole. And I didn't know how to fill that hole. And for me, regardfully, I turned to drugs and alcohol as my coping mechanism. You know, trying to balance that with being Christian and yada, yada, yada. Yeah. So you can imagine the cognitive dissonance. Absolutely. But when I finally came out and I realized, you know, too many times, you know, our funeral rites are not a celebration of life. And that's how I look at things. That's how I try to look at things, okay? You know, yes, I'm very sad that, you know, that my nephew's dead. It's not so much that he died, it's how he died. Yeah. That's what I'm upset about. It's not the fact that he's gone. With my girlfriend, it's not the fact that a car accident took her life. It's how she died. It's upsetting. Right. She had no chance. She was at the whim of another, you know, two other drivers and Mother Nature. But I look at the good things that we had, and I look at the bad things. It's like you said, knowing yourself and knowing what, you know, why are you sad? Are you sad because you miss them? Are you sad because, you know, something they gave you within life, whether it, you know, you know, just purpose or meaning or support in something that you do. Like for me, my one girlfriend was very supportive of my attempts to do my blog, and this was before my blog took off years ago. Without her support, it wouldn't be where it is today. I mean, granted, it was my hard work that did it, but it was her support that allowed me to do it to the point that I'm doing it at, you know, pretty much full time outside of my regular job. So it you know, everybody's different. It all depends on our I'm sorry, my nerves are like driving me nuts tonight.
It's okay.
It's everywhere.
And the thing that a lot of people don't really understand, because culturally we don't really seem to recognize this either, but no one deals with grief or anything the same way. You know, there's no one right way to grieve, and this always, but like, I like to watch a lot of true crime, and it crops up in these crime stories a lot. Well, so and so became a suspect because they weren't acting like a normal grieving person, and that drives me fucking batty, because there is no goddamn right way to grieve anybody, you know. But like you said, Beth, you're very sort of accepting of it in a way that you've even said to me, well, people think I'm cold, and that's not it. It's that you have a very pragmatic acceptance of those life events, and that's,
I mean, well, it's gone so far. People have actually called me the Ice Queen, and I say it jokingly, but I also say it seriously. I think because, I mean, I've faced my own mortality 3 times.
Yeah.
And on top of, I've also been very suicidal at times. So when you look at that and you realize, when you, pardon the graphics here, pull the trigger, that's it. That's the end. You have a different look on life. And like you said, everybody grieves differently. And I think one of the biggest, I don't know if fallacy is the right word, but I think one of our biggest mistakes is when Ann Kubler-Ross' 5 Stages of Grief came out. And she's actually even stated this, is that these aren't, quote, real stages. These are what people go through. You might go from the death of somebody to angry first.
Yep.
Instead of the other 4 stages ahead of time. You know, the denial and all that. Or you might go to the denial first. It all depends on the individuals. And one of her biggest regrets was that people took this to mean that
that's always it. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody goes through these 5 stages. They go through it in this order, and that's how you grieve. No, that's not what she meant.
And I've said it before too. Like, I've had a lot of loss in my life. And I, you know, now when it happens, depending on who the person is, of course, but I've made the comment, like, it's happened enough times, like, I don't even remotely go anywhere near the quote stages of grief. Like denial, I don't have the denial thing. You know, it just, no, it doesn't happen. And I don't necessarily get angry, but because to me, what's to get angry about? You know, like, what good does that do me? So,
well, I think you hit it too. With a lot of it depends on our upbringing, in a sense that one of the last things, the many atheists that I've talked to and the articles I've read, is that one of the last things to, quote, disappear, as far as atheism goes, is dealing with death, dealing with grief, dealing with the ending of a relationship. That's usually the last thing to go. And I think, and this kind of ties into something I wanted to hit on, you know, how we deal with that and how we learn to deal with it, I think that, you know, is very telling, because people, and this conflates in the whole atheism plus argument that I have, is that atheism is simple. It's a lack of belief or knowledge of God, however you want to term it. We won't parse words on definitions.
Yeah.
But
I just say it's no God.
Yeah. Basically, it's a cultural thing, how we deal with that. It has nothing to do whether you believe or disbelieve in God. And like you were saying, you're grasping onto the paranormal, and I did the same thing, but for a different reason. Leads to other issues. I mean, you have so-called psychics who are glomming onto I can contact your dead relatives.
Yep. And that's,
no, fuck, you can't.
And that's what I was kind of hanging on to a degree too. And I remember now my brother was killed 12 years ago, coming up on 12 years. And I remember my mother not too long afterwards, I think within the first year or so, had gone to a psychic and, was, oh yes, she talked to him and whatever. And then and she talked about your father. And of course I was like, really? Oh my God, like what, how, what, tell me, and blah, blah, blah. And so, and to me, this wasn't my mother's fault, but the stupid psychic. And now I kind of wish I knew who the fuck it was now, but my father committed suicide, and this psychic was telling him, oh, I'm talking to him and he says it's not like what you think, and it wasn't suicidal. And wow, like that fucked with me for a while, even though I personally didn't go to the psychic. It's like, well, that would be great if it wasn't suicide, like tell me more. And I even, like, for a while was telling my mom, like, hey, like, who was this? Maybe I want to go, kind of thing. And I realized later, and because that person lived far enough away, that it wasn't like I could just go and do it. And I, money was a bit of an issue and whatnot. And I'm glad now, because if I had gone and that bitch had started saying this kind of shit, and even when I was with our ghost hunting group, there was a local, quote, psychic that wanted to get involved with our group, and she invited, there was 3 of us went to her house, and she had a room in her basement that was all done up, and she would do readings, and she was like, oh, we'll do a free reading. And I forget now if I mentioned my father or what, but she went on this whole elaborate thing about how he hadn't actually crossed over and he was stuck here and I needed to like let it go and all this bullshit. And I'm like, I was in a better place emotionally then, and I was just kind of like, yeah, you're fucked in the head. But the first psychic that my mother went to, that really got me, like, for a long time afterwards, well, did he really commit suicide, or, what happened? And maybe there's more to it, and all of this. And that's not healthy, like I needed to accept the facts as they were and move on from that, and not have this all dredged up again. Like, oh, well, what if? So those people, like, that really pisses me off. And my mother thinking that, she's talking to her dead son and all of that bullshit too. Like, that just, well, I think it drags the grief process on longer than it ought to.
Yeah. Well, I think you hit on it too. It's the what if factor.
Yeah.
What if this happened? What if that happened? I mean, I have a friend whose mother diagnosed as bipolar, had a history of it, who is very similar situation in the fact that she committed suicide, and she started seeing a, quote, psychic who convinced her that her mother was murdered.
Oh, fuck.
And it's been 7 years, 10 years, give or take, between 7 and 10 years that this incident happened, and she's still dredging it up. And
yeah,
not to make light of the situation in the sense that she's still depressed about it, because depression is a whole nother ball of wax. But it's like you said, she has not been able to grieve properly, and what grieving properly is, I have no fucking clue, because it's individual.
Yeah, it's individual.
And that's the thing. I mean, my advice for people that are going through a grieving process, and it doesn't, as I said, doesn't necessarily have to be that. If you, and only you, or if someone, your significant other, thinks that you've gone above and beyond what is generally accepted, then seek out help. There's nothing wrong with talking to somebody.
Or if you feel that the experience is interfering with the rest of your life, then by all means go and talk to somebody, and even, and I've found this too, even just having someone that you can unload on to listen, that can do a lot of good. It really can, and like I said, I've gone through a lot of stuff just by myself. And last 2 years ago, when I went back to school for a year, part of paying college tuition meant that I had access to the counseling services on campus. And I figured, well, I've already paid for it with my tuition. What the hell? And I went, and it wasn't that I felt that I needed it, but by doing it, I found that it was beneficial, even though it wasn't. And it was weird because the counselor almost, now he never came out and said it, but he kind of was like, why are you here again? What do you need? But I still got a benefit out of it, even though I didn't necessarily need it per se.
Well, I think you kind of summed it up with know thyself. And
Yes.
for those that know me, that's actually one of my, besides that which does not kill me makes me stronger, is actually one of my favorite quotes is know thyself, and it comes from Aristotle and the Oracle of Delphi, the mythology surrounding that. And one of the biggest things that I learned with being bipolar, I had to know why. For the longest time, I wanted to find my birth mother. I'm adopted. I've been adopted since I was a baby, and I've known pretty much since I could understand what adoption means that I am. So I've known since I was about 5 years old, maybe younger, that I am not the natural child of my mother and my father. But for the longest time when I was first diagnosed, I wanted to know who my birth mother was, so I had somebody to blame.
Right.
And I think that falls into the same thing with Christianity and dealing with bad situations. You want somebody to blame, and Satan is usually the scapegoat.
Yes.
But as I began to learn what, I hate using this word, triggered me, what triggered my episodes where I either, thankfully depression has not been my friend until recently. I always had issues with becoming too manic, to the point that I thought it was a grand idea to test the theory of gravity a couple times. Yeah. So for me, my issue is I have bipolar type 1. I tend more towards mania, and if I get too manic, for lack of a better word, I become psychotic. I literally break with reality. Primarily, you'll see it in people that are schizophrenic, especially paranoid schizophrenics. So I know what I eat, and yes, what I eat and what I drink does affect my moods. I know if I do something like 3 days no sleep, which I can't do now if I tried, might trigger a manic episode. So I avoid that like the plague. I know that, I'll use my stroke as an example. I know when my apartment looks like a cyclone has hit, I'm in a depressive phase.
Right.
I know when I want to sleep beyond the after effects of the stroke that something's wrong, and I seek out help. Now, where I'm at, help is not really good. So poor Deb gets to be my sounding board. It doesn't necessarily have. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody that's professional. You have friends.
That's right.
And I think one of the biggest benefits since I've met Deb, besides the show, is the fact that I've been able to vent when things just aren't going right. And sometimes that's all you need. I mean, I have Ashley. I mean, I don't talk to Ashley as much as I do Deb, but I do know that they care. And especially since my stroke, it's been, as I said, I look at it as a challenge. Yeah, it fucking sucks. Okay, not being able to tie my shoes, not being able to put pants on right, which is a real pain in the ass. Although it's getting better since the second one.
Well, as I
You know,
said Sunday night, I said, who wears pants on a hangout anyway?
yeah, and yes, I do have pets. But I think how we approach it, I mean, for me personally, I look at things as a challenge. I hate to lose. I've been like that my entire life. I was an athlete for years, that I've had to let go by the wayside because physically, i.e., I need bilateral knee replacement. I look at that as a physical challenge. Mentally is a little bit differently. I have to struggle through, and Deb gets the brunt of it, where there's days where I literally want to shoot myself.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it wasn't, I think it was Friday night, halfway, Friday I went to work and I was just like, bleh. But then, like, a light bulb went off. And, I've done some reading on the after effects of strokes and what it does to your brain and all that garbage, but to be honest, it didn't make any sense. And
Yeah.
then Friday, I kind of, halfway through, I started to feel mentally better. Physically, as I said, it's a challenge, and I'm going to have to battle it. My biggest challenge now is, although Deb says otherwise, my speech is affected. And I struggle with words. Not that I can't think of them, I can't physically pronounce them. That's why my speech is a lot slower than what it was. But I went into Saturday, and I still felt good. So I had that light bulb moment. And I think when you deal with bad things, that is going to come eventually.
Absolutely.
For some people, it might be 2 or 3 days. For others, it might be 2 or 3 weeks. For others, it might be 2 or 3 years. But
and there's no time limit on any. Yeah. Like there's no. It's not like milestones with developing children where by this age this should happen. None of that works, and it's important.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was just thinking, Piaget.
Yeah.
Just thinking back to my college days.
But
Jean Piaget.
I can't. One thing I think is really important, and like I've gone through, like I say, numerous losses, and I've talked about before that I'm a survivor of incest. My father was an alcoholic that committed suicide. There's a lot of not to sort of like, ooh, I've got more shit than everybody else, but it's enough. And what I found was really important, because I didn't get any professional help with any of this really, but education. So even if you feel like you want to go talk to someone and you find a therapist or a psychologist or whatever, even on top of that, and we now have the internet. When I did this, like, I have a university degree in social work, not because I really wanted to be a social worker, but because that was how I educated myself about things like alcoholism and child abuse and sexual assault. And so not only learning why did this happen, because that was important to me at the time, was why did this happen? And I didn't, and of course, being that I was already an atheist by the time I decided to take this on, I wasn't like, oh, Satan got me, or, I did something that caused, God to punish me, or any of this bullshit. I had impure thoughts and that's why I got molested. Like, no, fuck that shit. But I went and I took, I researched, why does incest and molestation happen? What causes people to do this? And then I also researched, what are the known side effects of this happening? Because I wanted to know, what is this going to do to me? Like, even then I was like 5 or 6 years out from anything. Of course, at the time I didn't really understand that person was still emotionally victimizing me for years afterwards, but I still went and I educated. So why did this happen? What are the usual causes? What can I expect to happen to me? Like, what, and there's no one, oh, well, this is absolutely going to happen, but at least I can have an idea of what is known to have happened. And then I educated myself on alcoholism. Why do people become alcoholics? What what's the impact on the family? What's the impact on children of alcoholics? I researched suicide. Why do people, what causes people to do that, etc. So that was a huge part of my coping and my being able to work through these things, was not only just knowing myself, but knowing what the big picture was surrounding these things that happen to you in life. And so when you're like relying on religion for this shit, nobody ever thinks to go and like research, why do people molest children? It's, oh, Satan, or oh, too much pornography, or that kind of stupid shit. And so I can't stress that enough too. Education, like whatever, divorce, like, if you're going through a divorce, like go and educate yourself. Like, what are some of the common struggles that people have when they're dealing with a divorce? What are some of the reasons that people find that they get into a situation of divorce? Or, there's lots of things that you could educate yourself about, shitty situations that come up in life. And I think, they say knowledge is power, and I really believe that. When I understood, and this is really important because a lot of abuse survivors tend to want to blame themselves, or they're even told to blame themselves. And what really, like, I never did that. I never once did that. And I credit that a great deal to my diving in and finding out clinically, why do people molest children? And it's, again, there's a whole spectrum of why pedophiles are pedophiles, and there's situational, and there's the ones that identify only with, sexual arousal to children. There's like a whole spectrum of reasons, but I went and I learned about it. And then I could kind of say, okay, well, in my situation, this could apply, or this could apply, or this could apply. And I had a bit of understanding. And so there was never this temptation, well, I must have done something to cause grandpa to do that. Bullshit. There are clinical reasons why that happens. It's not evil. It's not Satan. It's not pornography, or, any of those stupid things that they come up with. And that was so huge for me to understand that. And again, like alcoholism, why do people drink? Like, my dad didn't drink because I was a bad child. My dad drank because he had issues that caused him to drink, and here's some of the reasons why that might be. So education is so important. And I think that goes part and parcel, even if you are going to seek out the help of a professional. I think that is something that you can take on and empower yourself with. Because like I said, knowledge is power. So if you go out and educate, and you've got the internet now. When I did this, I was relegated to a fucking library, and, thankfully my mother was able to help pay for my college, my university. But, imagine now if you go for student debt, because that's the only way you can find to sort of get therapy. Like, it's like the most, expensive form of therapy, and then I did all the work on top of it. But it worked for me because that's what I had. But we've got the internet now. We've got resources out there, and we're going to talk about some of those resources available to you as well. But yeah, that was so huge for me. Educate.
I think, again, you kind of hit the nail on the head. And I think this is what separates those of us that are atheists and those of us that are not. And I think where it kind of ties over is that it's the shifting of the mind of what's available and what's not. And I think the religious, the Reich does very well in suppressing the fact that knowledge is power. And y'all have heard me talk about it before. They do this intentionally. And there was an article that I posted today, and the title is "Sexual Abuse is Not Just a Catholic Problem." And unless you've been living under a rock, most of what I post deals with the abuses of the church, and it does not necessarily mean just sexual abuse, but any type of crime, for lack of a better word. And when I say the church, it's not just the Catholic Church. But this person was reacting to the recent movie Spotlight. Yes. And relied on Billy Graham's one grandson, Buzz. I'm gonna slaughter his last name. I have no clue how to say his last name. But enough. Basically, I said I'd mentioned my issues with Buzz before, and find it an odd that this Monsignor is who wrote this article. I find it odd that he references his work as he, made his view as a Catholic one Catholic can end all this bullshit to a degree if he spoke up, and I'm referring to the Pope.
Yes, I mean, of course.
All the Pope has to do is open the Vatican archives. Now, there's the Catholic Church as far as worldwide, and then there's the American Catholic Church, which, in my opinion, are two different entities. Okay. The American Catholic Church does not follow Rome, in my opinion. Bill Donahue is a classic example. I mean, when Pope Francis basically came out saying that we should treat the poor, justly, he was like all up in arms that he's a socialist. So that's why I say that. Now, granted, this author points out that it's not just Catholics, and which is what Boz did in his article. And he's done it before, and he has a history of being a prosecutor against sexual crimes against children within the church. Mm-hmm. But this guy goes into all these, all the commonalities. And I'm thinking, well, you're missing the point. You take one book that's 2,000 years old, that condones children as a chattel, and a doctrine that represses sexuality and the expression, that needs to be looked at, because that is the commonality in all religions of the Christian brand. And once you realize that your church, this is what you've been taught if you've been raised religiously since childhood and deconverted later in life, that's what you've been taught from the beginning. You've been taught sexual ethics from a book that's 2,000 years old.
That really has no sexual ethics in it.
Well, yeah. So, and that's going to carry over into our adult life, regardless of our circumstances, whether it's abuse, whether it's church abuse, whether it's, dealing with alcohol. Those ethics transfer over to our adult life, and that's why it's one of the last things to go within atheism. I mean, as I said, I know atheists that are still stuck on that issue, and they just don't know how to handle it. And I find, for me, it's talking to other people, that make me think. Dave Foda being a prime example. And I like to refer to Dave because he does make me think. But there's other people that, via Dave, have forced me to look at different issues from a different perspective.
Yes.
And it's like, and this guy goes so far. His closing line of this article, which really ticked me off, and I think this kind of sums up, is that one may ask, finally, why the Catholic situation has not received fair treatment in the print and electronic media. The answer, the media themselves, which often seems rather less interested in exposing child abuse at all levels of society than in Catholic bashing. Yeah. So instead of focusing on the problem, basically in his last line, he summed up his whole article as it's Catholic bashing. In other words, special privilege. And it's
if you come out and say, hey, look, there's too many fucking priests that are fucking children. Oh, well, you're Catholic bashing. Yeah, well, fuck you.
Yeah. Well, and it comes down to what you said. It's education. If you can look at the root cause of whatever your situation may be,
Yeah.
is it something you were taught, learned, and then ingrained into your psyche, or is it the situation
Yeah.
that has developed over time? And I think that's where talking to other people, reading, articles, just general gaining of knowledge, which the
Yeah.
church in itself of itself tries to suppress. I
Yeah.
think that's where we have our best shot, and it doesn't
Absolutely.
just go for group; it goes for everything. And I,
Absolutely.
you know, as I said, for me, I'm totally different than you. Although
Yeah.
we have a lot of similarities, but how it's a mindset. You
Yeah.
have, I'm not saying, oh, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Lord knows I have gotten that phrase so many times. It's like, no, it's not
Yeah.
that simple.
No,
It
it's
can
not.
be, but it's not. It's
Not
it's not that
usually.
simple. I think it's how much indoctrination do we have to undo,
Yeah.
and I think that's where the atheist movement in general. I think that's where we as a whole are much better off than those that are stuck in
Well,
religious dogma,
and it
because
comes back
we can
to,
look at everything.
yeah, and it comes back
God,
to like when somebody says, well, what does atheism have to offer? Well, we offer empowerment, we offer self-sufficiency, we offer education, and those are things that religion can never offer. They don't want empowerment, because if you're empowered, then you don't think you need Jesus. So they're never ever going to want you to feel empowered. They want you to feel dependent. That's what they
well,
need.
to kind of flip it back to my stroke, it's like I had my first one. It wasn't 100%. I didn't get my official diagnosis until 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Even though all my signs and symptoms showed that, and even my MRI said it, but my doctors and the hospital at the time refused, for lack of a better word, to admit it. So
Yeah.
I looked at it. Okay, this is what I've had. There was a possibility it could have been something else, but most of the signs and symptoms that I had leaned towards that. So I'm like, okay, I have had a stroke. Statistics say that within a year I'm going to have another one. Guess
Yeah.
what? I had it. I don't know about statistics afterward, but health-wise, I know that when I'm overweight, 2, I'm diabetic, 3, my cholesterol sucks. So I'm making educated changes
Yes.
to ward off number 3.
Yep.
Because it really sucks not being able to put on my pants. And there's a personal joke why I keep saying that, because after my second one, I really, literally, I'm like, well, this sucks. Because
Yeah.
I couldn't even tie my shoes. I had to go
Yeah.
down. I'd have to go to work with my shoes untied and have somebody tie my shoes.
Oh.
But thankfully, work is downstairs, and doing stairs is not very easy. But I could have totally ignored all the science behind it
Yeah.
and what they think, for lack of a better word, is the causes. What's causing my strokes? They still don't know. As far as most likely, it's probably due to my cholesterol throwing off clots.
Okay.
And so that's one of the situations I'm addressing.
Yeah.
Or I could just pray.
Yeah. Yes, there it is. Yeah, that's not going to work, I don't think.
And that is actually what someone told me to do.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
excuse me, but praying ain't gonna do me a damn bit of good. Because why would I pray to the guy that supposedly, or girl, that supposedly gave me this issue in the first place?
Yep.
And
And
they can't explain that. oh, you did, and it goes back to, oh, you did something wrong.
Yep.
And that's what it
And
goes back to.
exactly. Something else too I wanted to touch on before we go, in terms of ways to cope and whatnot. And this is something that I've learned myself, and I think is also really, really important, that people don't really understand a lot of the time. But um, emotions don't ever have to make sense. And I think it's really key to dealing with whatever shit that you might be dealing with. But there's no right or wrong way to feel about something. And we cannot control how we feel about something. What we can control is what we do with the feelings. So if a feeling doesn't make sense, or you're like, well, why do I feel this way? It doesn't warrant it in the situation that I'm in, and whatever, that doesn't mean that your feeling is wrong. But what you need to do then is understand, okay, my feelings don't match what the expectations of the situation is. So how do I deal with that? How do I work through the feelings and whatnot? Like, for instance, jealousy is a good example. If you feel jealousy in a situation where rationally you don't, no, you're sitting there going, well, I feel jealous, but really, if I look at the situation intellectually, I have no reason to feel jealous. Then then you have to sit down with yourself and think, okay, so why do I feel jealous, and what do I need to do about that? Or feeling angry at a situation. There's nothing wrong with feeling that way. And it's like, okay, well, the situation really doesn't warrant me feeling angry, but I feel angry. Then you sit down and you think to yourself, okay, why do I feel angry, and what do I need to do to deal with that? Feeling it is never wrong.
Yeah.
It's how we deal with those feelings that can go in a sideways direction depending on the situation. But what I've found, and this is not going to work for everybody, and so please don't think that it has to resonate to you, but this is what I find, is setting aside some alone time to let myself experience the feeling, whatever it is, no matter whether it makes sense or not, or whether you think you should be feeling it or not, is irrelevant. I set aside the time to allow myself those feelings and express those feelings. So, and it might be, if you want to sit down with your spouse and maybe have a good cry, or if you want to go somewhere by yourself and yell and scream and throw things, or whatever works for you. And I find alone time where I can let it out. And for me, a lot of the time, it's just a lot of crying, depending on the situation. But I can go somewhere and do that where I don't feel like I'm, I need to do it on my own. That's just me, right? I prefer the solitude. But you may feel like you want a best friend or a spouse or somebody there to give you a hug when you do it or whatnot. But let yourself feel it, and then rationalize how to deal with the feeling. And sometimes I find that once I've expressed the feeling, I don't really need to do anything else. And that's, again, that may not be right for you, but that's what works for me. But I think it's really important that everybody understand that there's never a wrong feeling. You can only be wrong in how you deal with the feeling. So anyway,
Well,
that's my.
I think you hit something important there too. There's alone time, being alone, and then there's loneliness. And
Yes.
I think what too many people do is they allow the loneliness to sink in.
Yes.
I mean, and I kind of do the same thing. Like, I'll use my nephew as an example. Is that, like, after his death, I basically spent a day, quote, mourning.
Yes.
Although my concept of mourning is probably much different than everybody. I allowed the anger of his death. I allowed the sadness of his death, and the fact that I'm going to physically miss his smile. He had this most wonderful smile. I'm going to physically miss him playing his guitar. But that's what I'm going to miss. And that's where the whole, I think, once I got through that, like you said, it could take you a day, it could take you a week, however, but I allowed myself to feel. And then in my odd way, I moved on from that. Yes,
Yeah.
I still want the person responsible for his death caught. I'm not saying that I'm ignoring that, but I know that now being 2 years, almost actually 2 years to the day, almost past that point, the likelihood of the perpetrator being caught is zero.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the anger comes in, is people confuse the anger of the death, depending on the situation, with, I mean, their feelings get confused and they don't allow themselves. I mean, I know being a cutter, my anger issues, and I have a lot of them, I mistook my anger that I had towards my dad and his corporal punishment, for lack of a better word, to ingrain itself into me. So anytime I thought I messed up, I turned that on myself. So it's
Right.
understanding where your feelings are coming from and why you are having them, and
Yeah.
allowing yourself to feel them. It is what I think the church does not allow,
No.
because they don't want you to think rationally about it. They want you to react. They want you to
Exactly.
blame,
They
and I
want
think that's
they
important.
they want you to put yourself in a situation where needing God is reinforced, as
Yes.
opposed to being in a situation where, hey, I understand what's going on in my mind and in my emotions, and I'm developing a healthy way to deal with that. They don't want you to do that. They want you to go and pray more and give more money. That's what they want.
You just hit it. Money.
Yeah, more money, more money. Yep. And the Catholic, this blew my mind when, like a couple of, was it 2013? We went on vacation in Quebec City, and I went to the Basilique de Saint-Anne-de-Beaupré. I'd been there in high school, and I love the architecture and all of that, and so that's partly why I wanted to go back. And yes, I wore my God's busy, can I help you with the double shirt, and it was awesome. But in these Catholic churches, like, and I'm sure if and any of you who used to be Catholic, or those of you may have seen it on movies and whatnot, where you go and there's all the candles and you can go light a candle for somebody and have prayers for them or whatever. They want you to fucking pay for that. And there's actually signs right on the racks of candles, $5 or
Yes.
whatever to fucking pay. I'm like, are you? That blew my mind. I'm like, because I knew about the practice, but we went to a couple of,
Indulgences.
yeah, and we went to a couple of different. There was Saint Anne de Beaupré, and then there was another, the oldest church in Quebec City that we went to see, had been Catholic, and just it blew my fucking mind. I'm like, so not only does your God want me to like get on my knees and kiss his ass to help my dead relative or struggling person that I care about or whatever, but you want me to pay for the fucking privilege? Like, holy
Well,
shit, that pissed me off.
I think one of the funny things, going back to Martin Luther, one of the things he got right was the elimination of indulgences.
Yes.
And that's exactly what you're describing, is that I know about other churches because I haven't looked into it, but that whole situation. Well, if you donate $5, we'll pray harder.
Yeah. Yeah. Or we'll
That's
put you on our
basically what it
prayer
comes.
list.
Yeah. I mean, prayer lists in and of themselves are disgusting, in my opinion. Basically, it's a
Yeah.
gossip chain.
Yes.
And I say this lightly because I know that I am on like 2 or 3 prayer chains, and one is through my father, and
Yeah.
he's 86 years old. I'm not gonna sit there and argue with him. As I said, our relationship is tenuous at best, so I'm not
Right.
gonna rock the boat there. Now, maybe if I was younger, I'd probably be an asshole.
Yeah.
But it's like, I have another friend that has, oh, do you mind if I put you on my prayer time? And I so wanted to say, what the fuck is that gonna do?
Yeah, I
It's
know.
not gonna do it. I mean, I know I'm coming down really harsh on religious belief. And it's just because it so pervades, and I think it causes so many issues in how we deal with things, especially, bad things.
Yeah.
It just to me it's just the biggest cop out, and it's like, I think one of the biggest things that I've gotten from deconverting for is that I finally see it for what it is. And going back to the whole paranormal, one of the things I realized, and it was very, I'll say, painful in the sense that I lost a lot of friends over it, because I have no issue pointing it out now, is that the paranormal is just like religion. If you don't
Yes.
agree with their point of view,
Yep.
you're an outlier.
Yep.
Now, if you were in the anti-vax community, being an outlier was good, i.e., the movie Vax being pulled from Tribeca, but that's a whole nother story. It's just, yeah, my mind's
Yeah.
going a mile a minute, but it's so pervasive, and I know people in the atheist community that are suffering because they are, I won't say holding on to, but they are surrounded by this belief, and
Yeah.
it's like, there's really no, I think the biggest caveat we can take from this is there really is no easy way around it. There is no one thing that's going to help
No.
everybody. It's all going to be individual, and
It's hard fucking work.
yeah,
And
it's
there's
work.
no way around it. There's nothing like you can't pray to God and hope that he's going to snap his fingers and make it all feel better. It sucks and it's hard fucking work and there's
Yeah.
no way around that. You're going to have to want to put the work into it. But it's not a bad thing.
No.
And like you hear Christians talk about, oh, when there's heaven, there won't be any pain and suffering, and no one will ever hurt again. Like, fuck that. I
Well,
am who I am because of the bad shit, and there's no
yes.
way around that.
Yep.
And I now, the fact that I went through everything by myself kind of sucked, and it would have been nice if I had a bit of support and whatnot, but I didn't. And so now I'm a shit ton stronger now than I ever would have been maybe otherwise. I don't know, but I mean, I can't conceive of something that I wouldn't be able to deal with on an emotional level now. I can't think of it. Like death. Okay, well, I've dealt with so many of those now. It's always going to hurt, but I don't even ponder that it's something that would devastate me, like on a, that I couldn't deal with it. Like death, yeah, okay, here's another one, I'll deal with it. I can't conceive of anything that I can't handle anymore, and that's because I figured out on my own how to deal with that. So yeah, it's hard fucking work, but it's worth it, and you can only benefit from doing the hard work. And if that means if you need a professional's guidance to do the hard work, absolutely do that, because they're the ones, like I said before, they're the ones that have got the schooling. They understand, how people work. They understand the psychology. They can point you in the right direction, but you're still going to have to do the hard work on, yourself.
Well, I think something you hit on too is like with dealing with it, and I'm gonna toot Deb's horn here, is that I can't, and not just Deb's, everybody's that I've had contact with, especially in the last year, I can't imagine going through what I'm going through right now without my friendship to Deb, without my friendship to Dave, without my friendship to Ashley and Sun Winks, and everybody who has commented on my inane posts as I deal with whatever I'm dealing with. And, that support, not having to deal with it alone, has helped immensely. Are they
Yeah.
professionals? No, but they are friends.
Yeah.
And they are people that honestly, in my opinion, care. And that
Yes.
honesty is not based on a mythology from 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think you probably would agree with me that it's not just Christianity. It's
No. It's
Islam
all.
has the same fucking bullshit.
Well,
And for those of
and
you that say that we never pick on Islam, bull fucking
oh,
shit.
I fucking pick
Islam,
on it every day.
yeah, yeah. I mean, Islam falls into the same category. They have their
What
same, if
what
not similar,
irks
mythology.
me, what pisses me off about Islam, actually, and I get this a lot from Muslims, is when I'm critical of Islam, they come, well, Islam tells us to give to the poor and treat poor people well. I'm like, yeah, I figured that out without the fucking book, asshole. So, you know,
Yeah, it's like they're coming up with something original. Well, even in Islam, even in Christianity, sorry dudes, it's been predated by the
exactly.
Book of the Dead, Instructions of Shurpak. This is not original thinking. And as I always
Exactly.
say, there is nothing original in religion, especially apologetics. You know,
Exactly.
and I think that's what makes it, because your concern, Deb's or Ashley's concern, any number of people is an honest concern. It's not based on,
Yep.
oh, how many brownie points can I score with the man upstairs?
Exactly. I'm going to
Eh,
give to the poor because that's what Jesus wants me to. And I'll be a better Christian and I'll be a good example to other Christians and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, fuck that. I like to help people because I like to fucking help people. And I don't need, a fucking golden palace in the sky bullshit to do that. So, yeah, fuck you and your fake morality.
yeah.
But we need to start wrapping things up a little bit. But
Oh,
one,
fine.
I know. One other thing too, though, and to come back to, well, what does atheism have to offer? Atheism also has to offer a genuine community, not a
Yeah.
fake fucking community that dresses up pretty on Sunday to kiss God's ass. We're real. And those of you who listen, that also listen to No Religion Required, that's family. And we like to be family. And, if you're going through hard times and if you've suffered a loss or you've got things going on that you're not sure how to cope with, there's a whole family of atheists out there who are willing to support you because you're a fellow human that needs support. And don't be afraid
And
to
if they can't,
go ahead.
whether it's physically or emotionally, they might have the resources or the knowledge to send you in the right direction.
Yeah. Exactly. And they're going to do that because they want to do that, because they value you as a fellow human, not because you're an opportunity to kiss up to fucking God. So, don't feel like you can't reach out to the community and, ask for that helping hand if you need it. Like, look at, if those of you who listen to No Religion Required, Morgan, one of the co-hosts, she had an opportunity to study at Cambridge in England this summer. And she was, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford the flights and blah, blah, blah. And we said, Morgan, do a GoFundMe. She's like, oh, I can't do that. And nobody's going to want to do that and blah, blah, blah. And we said, no, do it. And the community came together, and within a week she had her plane tickets, and now she can go and take that opportunity to study in Cambridge. And it's only for a summer, but it's an opportunity that she didn't think she was going to have.
Opportunity of a lifetime.
Exactly.
Well,
and
going along with the GoFundMe, I mean, everybody knows that I did a GoFundMe when I had my first stroke because I was going to be out of work for 3 months. And it's like you said, community. That's the key.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that we honestly come to in our disbelief of God. We know that there's nothing after this life that's going to make
we know we can't. We know we can't
better.
you know, Morgan knew that she couldn't sit there and pray for God to magically give her plane fare to England, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to do something real, and that's what atheism offers is doing something real, taking real action, doing something that will get shit done, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So I think that about sums it up. Did you have anything else you want to add before we go?
Nope, you pretty much hit it all, and it's a topic that we could probably go on for hours just
Well, I think
bullshitting about this stuff.
we'll probably come back to this again because I know Ashley actually really wanted to be in on this, and you know, life does that to you, and she couldn't be here. But and I think you know, we'd like to come back and talk to this and maybe give listeners an opportunity to give us their stories, give us their ways of coping with stuff and their input too. So I think we'll probably come back to this. For
Well,
sure.
I think it's important too to know what resources do we have
Yes.
in dealing with situations. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. As I said, you know, divorce is big up there, and
Yep.
there is a reason why I keep saying that.
Yeah.
But
I grieved for my marriage. I absolutely
yeah,
did. My first marriage. Absolutely.
yeah, and I think too, and I'm curious to see, and I'm going to pick on Ashley a little bit here, how for Ashley it may be different because she is so quote new as far as her atheism goes. I mean, is this, you know, it's an interesting paradigm. Is, you know, is it really the last sticking point? Is how we deal with bad shit?
Yeah.
You know, is that the last to go? I mean, everybody I have talked to, it's always been the. I mean, it's from
Yep. Same here.
how they deal with death is usually the last thing to go. And
Absolutely.
I think for me, because I have such a jaded view of it to begin with, it was a little bit easier for me in that regard.
Yeah.
But I still clung on to, like you, the whole paranormal shit. Like, I had one psychic friend who tried to contact Kyle and fed me this line of bullshit, and she was so far off.
Mm.
I was like, no, he's gone. There, as much as I would like to, no.
Well, as speaking of resources, so I did take a quick look, and one we already knew about, and like I say, it's so important for us to find secular resources because we all know that if you go to some therapist who's a Jesus lover, they're not going to respect the fact that you don't want to hear about how you need more Jesus in your life. They're just not going to do that because we know that
Tennessee being the prime example.
Yeah, exactly. And because and I mean they think they're doing a good thing, and I don't think it's always malicious. Sometimes it is, but you know, they think they're doing a good thing or whatever, but we know that doesn't fucking help. So we know, of course, that there is recovery from religion out there, and they have these secular therapy therapists, which is a great thing. It's as far as I know, though, only available in the US, but it's seculartherapy.org, and they can match you up with a secular therapist either in your reasonable area, but they also do therapy via telephone or Skype. And if you go to seculartherapy.org, or sorry, not seculartherapy.org, the Hotline Project. We also have the Hotline Project, but seculartherapy.org, they will do what they can to match you up with a therapist, as I say, either in person or via Skype, and, you know, get you that resource to talk to a professionally trained therapist who is not going to delve into the woo religion bullshit. They're going to be real with you, and they're going to give you real secular coping mechanisms. So seculartherapy.org. And then we have the Hotline Project, which we've talked about before. And now the Hotline Project, they will talk to believers of all stripes as well. They're not solely focused on, just sort of a therapy kind of thing. It's also for people who might be doubting religion or dealing with trying to maybe extricate themselves from religion, all of that. But they're a definite resource as well. And they're at 1-844-I-DOUBT-IT or 1-844-368-2848. And we'll make sure we put that information in the show notes. And the Hotline Project just launched chat support. So if you go to recoveringfromreligion.org/hotline-project, on their page, you can log in and speak to someone via chat, which is really, really cool, I think, because sometimes, like, what if you're at work or something and you've got half an hour on your lunch break, but you don't want to be on the phone where people can hear. Yeah, so I'm not sure I believe in God anymore or something, so you can go on chat and it's maybe more discreet. And some people maybe find that they're more articulate when they're writing and they have a better way of expressing themselves when they're writing. So you can definitely do that. Now, I tried to find something in Canada and I didn't really find anything specific, but you're far less likely to find a therapist that's going to foist the religious shit on you in Canada, thankfully. I did, but you know what was really sad? When I Googled secular therapy or secular therapist, every fucking link said Christian specifically in it until I said minus Christian, minus Bible. So these fuckers are seeding Google so that they show up when you're specifically trying to find a secular therapist. That pissed me the fuck off. Because we know that you can do stuff in the Google rankings to show up in certain ways.
I will add this one caveat, and yes, that seeding that you're seeing is intentional. And especially down here in the States, there is a big argument, for lack, on whether Christian trained or Christian therapists, let me rephrase that, are actually therapists. Are you going for counseling or are you going for Bible study?
That's true too, because some of these people will get a Doctor of Divinity, which, I'm sorry, to me is a bullshit degree, and then set out their shingle as, oh, I have a doctorate, and people think that they have a doctorate in like psychology or some shit, and they don't.
Yes. Yeah. The biggest thing is, and I'm going to pick on the Catholic Church here, is a priest counseling a couple to be married.
Yeah,
if we don't see the problem with that.
or
excuse me,
counseling.
Their rationale is I'm married to Christ.
Yeah, which means you're in a gay relationship and you shouldn't be talking to heteros in the first place, you dumb shit.
Yeah. So you do have, and one thing we'll add to that is, if you go for professional counseling, your therapist is your employee.
Yes.
Your therapist works for you.
Yes.
If for some odd reason you don't gel, whether it takes a week, whether it takes 3 weeks, kisses or her ass goodbye. I went through 18 therapists before I found one that worked. Yeah. I'm a stubborn ox. I'm opinionated. And I like to play devil's advocate. Well, my last therapist who stuck and who is probably the best therapist I had, saw through that bullshit and basically point blank said, do you want to sink or swim? This was when I walked in to my first official appointment. I had her in group when I was in the hospital. She saw through my bullshit, and that's what you need. You need someone that's going to make you think and make you examine what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, etc. All the stuff we kind of blurbed about. But I'm glad you did the resources, because I never even thought to do that.
Oh no, I made sure. I wanted to give people something to go to, and I know a number of people involved with recovery from religion. They're really good people. They really, really care about you as a person, and they're going to do their best to get you whatever resources that you need. So definitely check them out. For, like I say, for Canada, I couldn't really find. I found one therapist who specifically said that they were secular in Toronto. I'm sure they're out there. There are directories too, and maybe the next time we do a show about this, I can find a bit more detailed information about it.
Well, we could put out a call too to our Canadian listeners that if you know of a directory, or if you know of a secular therapist in a specific area, post it either in the group page or the show page, or email Deb or myself or Ashley and say, hey, so and so does this,
let us know.
More resources we can get out there, especially for Canada. And I think part of it might be too is that it's really not an issue in Canada like it is here. But it's just off the cuff. But because I know over in England they don't have this problem. But
time to get out of here. We're actually like half hour over time, but it's important. It's important. So I hope we've been able to give some direction to folks and make people think. And you're never alone. You never have to go through stuff by yourself if you don't want to, especially now that we have the internet age. I wish we had the internet when I was younger. I would have
20 years ago,
30 years ago, I would have reached out to more people, but we're here now. We want to help. We want to be there for you, and a lot of other people do too. So don't hesitate to reach out if you feel like you're alone and you need to talk to somebody. So we're here, we're community, and we want to help because we want to help, not because we're trying to kiss fucking Sky Daddy's ass. So on that note, Beth, where can we find you?
Easiest way is on Twitter, which is Dune998, which connects to my blog, and also to Facebook. And you'll want to use Beth A. Hambridge. If you use without the A, you're going to get my vanilla page, and not much there. But I'm always online, so when I'm not at work.
And of course, I also appear in Atheist Apocalypse, which you can find at atheistapocalypse.com. Next week should be episode 6, and we're going to be starting production of season 3 before too long. And kind of exciting, we'll be showing up on iHeartRadio soon, so you'll be able to find us over there as well. And of course, we now have beyondthetrailerpark.com. And you can find all of the places that the show shows up, and you'll be able to find what our next topics coming up are. We are now on Stitcher as well as Spreaker and iTunes. And for those of you who are still using Blackberries, because I fucking use Blackberry, there is a client called... Yeah, stop your laughing. There's another...
Hey, I got a dumb phone.
I know. There's a client called Nobex, and I actually got the show on Nobex. So if you use a BlackBerry, Nobex has a lot of the good podcasts on it, and you'll be able to find us on there now too. But all of that is on beyondthetrailerpark.com. We have email addresses on there now for the show and for Beth and Ashley and I, if you want to contact us. A little patience with that, because we're just starting. We haven't really used those yet, so we have to remember that they're there and how to log in and stuff. I know Beth doesn't know where to go yet, but we'll get there. So I think that's about it. And Beth said she had one more thing she wanted to add.
Surprisingly enough, I will be actually appearing on Country Fried Free Thought. I'm actually I'm venturing out of the beyond the trailer park zone.
Sweet.
As I becoming a little bit more vocal.
Yep.
In the verbal sense, besides writing, but so that'll be the interview is scheduled for Sunday. I'm not sure yet as to release date, but I'll be talking primarily about the theocracy and how it ties into our upcoming elections and why Ted Cruz is a really, really bad choice. Actually, worse than Trump.
We're still not taking him back. I'm sorry. You can deal with him however. No. No. All right. Well, folks, we'll call it a night. And next week, we are going to be talking with Rachel Nannon Brown about evolutionary sexuality. So that's going to be an exciting show. No pun intended. And
God damn, I'm going to blush all show, aren't I?
Probably. I'm thinking the water bottle will probably make an appearance, but we'll see. So that's what we're going to be talking about next week. So until then, I will leave us all with our humanist creed from Dave motherfucking Foda, and we will see you next week.
I know the truth and power of reason and of rational thinking, and I will use them to my advantage. I know the truth and power of educating myself and of expanding my intellectual boundaries, and I will educate myself. I know the truth and power of vanquishing ignorance, and I will do so whenever the opportunity presents itself. I know the truth and power of morality without supervision, and of true and accurate righteousness. I know the truth and power of obliterating tyranny, be it intellectual, emotional, or philosophical, and will work toward that goal whenever and however possible. I know the truth and power of human ingenuity. I know the truth and power of human compassion, and I will be mindful of the welfare of others. I know the truth and power of equality and fairness for all living things. I know the truth and power of the importance of our families, our friends, and our fellow men and women. I know the truth and power of human stewardship of our lands, our waters, and our skies, and I will try to act to preserve our environment. I know the truth and power of the sciences of mathematics, of physics, and of chemistry, and of the important role of these disciplines in understanding the workings of this cosmos. I know the truth and power of the rejection of all notions or beliefs that reside in the supernatural or the superstitious, and of those notions or beliefs that we are not supposed to be able to explain. And I know that these rejections are necessary for humankind's survival. I am a human being with a free mind, liberated from irrational influence and from unreasonable dogma.